Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Hello.
Um,
While folks are getting settled, if you want to put in the chat your role, institution, maybe a little bit about what you're hoping to present at AACRAO.
Give it another minute here and then we'll go ahead and get started. Just want to make sure if anybody's transitioning from one meeting to another, they have a second. While we're doing that, Kelsey and I can introduce ourselves. So I'm Dr. Curtis Clock. I'm one of the associate registrars at Ball State University, and I primarily work with the catalog, schedule, and student curriculum functions here on our campus.
And I'm Dr. Kelsey Simonson. I'm the Registrar and Director of Community Standards for Tufts University's Dental School in Boston, Massachusetts.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. So we just a little bit about ourselves. We wanted to offer this presentation as a way to kind of give you all a better idea of what is so important about presenting and how you can do it effectively. So we're going to give you some tips about how to structure that, both in terms of the design of your presentation and also in terms of the delivery of your presentation as well. Our goal here is to try to help you feel comfortable about presenting at a national conference. Any type of presenting can be kind of daunting, so we understand feeling a little nervous about that. So our goal is to help you with that today. So we're hoping to reach a wider network of folks to present and share their knowledge. And I have selfishly tabbed Kelsey as somebody who can help me present on that because we have presented several times before and are planning to present this year at AACRAO as well.
And if you are nervous about presenting, don't worry. I've been presenting at AACRAO since 2018, and I still get very nervous before any presentation that I do to this day. We're looking to connect with other people to get you excited about your presentations and to help you feel confident in the material that you know, and how to present that effectively to other people. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We're going to ask to hold questions until the end, at least unmuted questions. You can feel free to participate in the chat until the end. We'll share the slides later and our email addresses. So if you don't get to answer all your questions in this webinar, feel free to email us afterwards and we'll be happy to connect with you.
All right, so we're going to give you a few minutes to think about what you've seen that works in presentations and drop it in the chat. Conversely, you can also think about what concerns do you have about presenting.
And while you folks are doing that, I'll let Becky take the reins.
I just wanted to say a quick hello and welcome. My name is Becky Fowkes. I'm the Director of Meetings here at AACRAO, and wanted to just give our program chair, Dan Weber, an opportunity to also introduce himself. He's been working very closely with the program committee and the PACs that reviewed your sessions and accepted you. So just wanted to say hello, and you'll hear from me later, but hi, Dan.
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dan Weber, and I serve as the Registrar and Director of Registrar Services at Oakton College in Illinois. And just wanted to take a moment. I serve AACRAO in the way of being the program chair for the Seattle Annual Meeting. We're really excited to have you presenting on your different topics. We have a very diverse slate of offerings this year. We had so many that we closed the submission deadline on the actual deadline, and we still have a lot of wonderful alternates that are hoping to present. But just congratulations on having your session approved to be able to present at AACRAO. We have about 190 sessions that will actually be presented, and there are going to be about 70 of you today in this meeting. So I'm not going to take up much more time, but I just really wanted to thank you on behalf of the professional activities committees, the PACs, and the program committee for your involvement in AACRAO and your willingness to present. So I'm going to turn the presentation back to Dr. Clock and Dr. Simonson.
Thank you so much, Dan, and sorry I forgot about you.
No worries.
I was joking with Kelsey that once I start a presentation, I just got to keep going. So thank you, Kelsey, for pumping the brakes on that.
We are passionate.
All right. So before I had to pause there for a second, I had asked all of you to think for a few moments about what you've seen in presentations that you think works well, or also what concerns you have about presenting. And go ahead and feel free to pop those in the chat, and we can kind of talk through some of those here before we go on to the next slide here.
I see so far in audience engagement and interactive and activity time. And yes, both of those are especially effective techniques like we're doing right now. It offers you time to get your audience involved and invested in what you are talking about, but also gives you a little bit of time to collect, especially if you're interspersing those within your presentation.
Yep. So a couple of nerves and just being a new presenter, we can definitely help with that today. Awesome.
And know that you're not alone with feeling nervous. Again, I get nervous before every presentation, and the fear of public speaking is the most common phobia that folks have. It's above death, spiders, height, it's public speaking. Somewhere between 40 and 75% of all folks have a fear of public speaking.
All right. So this question here, how can our presentations facilitate learning and connections, is overall one of the main things that we're going to cover today. So when you're thinking about your presentations, there's typically two types of outcomes that you're seeking to go for. And that is that you want to learn about something, a particular topic, and you want folks to sustain that learning. So not just learn it in that moment and then forget it as they walk out the door, but actually take it back to their campuses and make change. And the other change is that you can connect folks with each other that have a shared interest around either a challenge or maybe a process, a way to improve something. And that then those folks can identify you as a contact or a partner or a resource for improving that in the future. I know, for example, I still reach out to folks from previous conferences that I've attended, that I went to their presentation and asked them questions about different things. And sometimes that can be really key when you encounter something that is brand new and it's a new way of tackling that. And they may not have all the answers, but they can at least steer you in the right direction. All right, so as you can see for this slide, we've got our learning outcomes up here. We recommend that as you're structuring your presentations, that this is where you kind of start building your presentation framework. So it may seem counterproductive because what you want people to walk out with is like the end goal. And as you're building your presentation, how do you do that? So we recommend that you do it kind of in a reverse function, or backwards design, whatever you want to call it. And that's this idea that you're going to determine what you want people to walk out the door with, and then build your presentation based on that. This helps you make choices about not only what you want to deliver, but how to deliver it. And it helps center your presentation design on the outcomes and the experiences, not just the content. So this starts with your learning objectives. So I'm kind of like straddling the goal or the balance here between meta and actually delivering this presentation as well. But for the goals of this presentation, we want you to identify ways that tap into the curiosity of your audience. So what are some ways that you can get your audience thinking? And we're going to also give you some examples of that. Some of you had mentioned audience engagement as a potential thing that you're interested in. We're also going to talk about ways to create a welcoming environment that your audience can be a part of. That particular network or environment that your audience is a part of really does shape how your presentation evolves and is delivered. And we're also going to look at some strategies for your attendees learning. What are some different ways that we can ensure the retention of the information that you're going to share? Let's see here. One thing to consider thinking about how you deliver your content. Some of you had mentioned in the chat that you were concerned about audience involvement and how to do that, you might think of what it is the goal of your presentation. So is your goal to share information, or is it to connect others? And that may help you decide on what type of activity you might do. So for example, if you're trying to create a community where you can reach out to people and have connections, maybe you can work together one-on-one with other folks in the room to do some think, pair, share, so that folks have an intimate opportunity to interconnect with one another rather than just listening to a lecture, for example. All right, so we have a four-part framework for creating and delivering effective presentations. So the first step in that is to activate, and this is essentially kind of the warm-up part of your presentation. So you want to get the audience excited about where they're going and what you're going to talk about in that presentation. So a good way of doing that is to give them kind of like a roadmap in terms of what they're going to be expecting from the presentation. It kind of seems intuitive, but you want to make sure that the audience can kind of follow along with you as the presenter so they know exactly what to expect from the presentation. That will help them retain that information better. Once you've done that and you've kind of laid the framework for what you're going to present, you're going to then deliver your content. So this is the part where you're going to give the information that everyone has come there to receive. With this in mind, while it is probably the most understood part of a presentation, it's also the most difficult part, right? How do we deliver content in an engaging way that's going to facilitate folks paying attention for an hour or an hour and a half, whatever it may be, and also facilitate remembering of that information that you're delivering? After that, you're going to want to engage and give folks in the room an opportunity to utilize those concepts and info in order to remember it and use it later. For the most part, this can be done with getting people to think about how it applies to their context. So this is a really great way where you can get your audience involved, thinking about new concepts that they've just learned and then applying them right there in that environment. And then last, you want to wrap up. I think one of my high school English teachers always said, when you go to bed, you always got to make sure you close the curtains, right? So just like anything, you have to kind of wrap it up and conclude. You always want to make sure that at the end of your presentation, you dedicate some time to kind of recap what are the important key points that you discussed, and then help the audience members know what are the important parts of that presentation that they should take away and keep for the future. I have a easy way of remembering this, and this was something that I learned from my Com 210 professor many years ago, but kind of a more simplistic way of thinking about this framework is you tell your audience what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and then you tell them what you've told them. So kind of an easier way of remembering. And I still to this day, I think I took that class 16 years ago, something like that. I still remember that. So if it's easier for you to remember that, I would encourage you to keep that in mind. And I can drop that in the chat if anybody finds that helpful.
All right, so first we're going to go over ways to activate your audience. And we'll discuss 3 different ways to warm up your audience. The first being cognitive priming. So that's getting them and their minds ready for what's to come. You're telling them what you're going to tell them, setting your expectations, and setting a welcoming and inclusive tone for the room that you're in. So we want to note that these techniques both deal with the socio-emotional components as well as the cognitive components of your audience. And both of these are really critical. Folks will be able to learn better and they'll be more receptive to your content when they feel like they're curious about their content. They're relaxed in the room. They feel okay asking questions, and they feel like you are an authority and that you have your presentation organized. All right, so activating by priming. Priming preconditions the mind for what's to come so that folks are more receptive or ready for the information that's going to come later. So your goal is to hook your audience by generating curiosity and excitement. So you want to do something like a teaser that will drive engagement throughout your presentation. And there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. You can start with a question or a data point to get them thinking and engaged with the content and the material. You can start with a story or a case study to give real life context to your topic as opposed to thinking of it just in the abstract. Giving human characters makes it more meaningful and provides the opportunity for folks to really anchor themselves in that situation. People love real on-the-job stories because it feels relevant, feels more applied, especially at conferences like this that are work related. Use examples from your life or lives of the people that you know to hook the audience in. We have a couple of examples here of two siblings taking a test. And so the element of surprise captures the attention of your audience here. So we can also use predictions. Our minds are hardwired to seek answers and know if we're right. Folks will listen to the rest of the presentation to find out if they were right and to understand why or why not. Most presenters go wrong in the beginning because they ramble too long about background information that isn't super relevant or their personal and professional history without tying it back directly to the topic. And so activating by creating an inclusive environment. Creating an inclusive environment starts the moment that somebody walks into the door of your presentation room. So it's important to start by creating a welcoming environment the minute that you walk into the room. Consider milling about the room instead of just gluing yourself to the podium. I find myself guilty of this, but it really does help create a more inclusive atmosphere if you are talking one-on-one with a few people or getting some individual conversations started or small groups before the presentation begins. Using humor in your introductions is a good way to break the ice and set folks at ease. Introductions are also a good time to set those expectations as to when you'd prefer questions to be asked or when you like folks to chime in, whether it's throughout your presentation or at the end. And you can thank people in advance for their participation in your session. I would advise that you break the ice, not delve too far into the self-deprecation territory. I've made jokes about tech malfunctioning, or if the topic is particularly hot, making a joke connecting to recent news, but try not to make an implication that you don't know what you're doing or that you're unprepared. Your audience will be more at ease with someone who feels like they're ready to present or that they've done this before. How you choose to create your environment may depend on what you are presenting on. Depending on the topic, sometimes I presented on things like burnout or stress in the workforce, and that can elicit some personal stories or anecdotes that sometimes can be challenging to share, especially if you have folks who are supervisees that might not feel comfortable talking about tough topics with their supervisors. So you want to set the expectation that this is a safe space to discuss, and limit the scope of the discussion to what's in the room, but provide that level of empathy and security for folks to be able to share some of those tough topics. Sometimes you might be presenting on things like Title IX compliance or your registrar's role in academic governance, and people still may have those different stories, and sometimes they're just as challenging as a personal story, but they're of a more concrete nature. So you want to thank people for their time and their thoughts on this topic. You want to acknowledge level of expertise. Some people in the room might have more expertise than you and some less, and that's fine. And that's why it's awesome to be in a room in community to be discussing those topics. If you get asked questions that you personally don't know or don't understand, you can get back to people or say something like, there's a lot in that question. I'm going to respond to part of it and we can discuss more offline. Sometimes if you're using stories, if they relate that are also sensitive, they might contain information that's personal to your institution or an individual situation. Again, you want to establish that sort of cone of security, cone of silence approach. It varies, but give a good think about your topic and what you want to accomplish and let that lead your efforts to creating that inclusive environment. And finally, we activate by setting expectations. I will let Curtis take this one.
Yeah, and I think Connie had actually just mentioned milling around and welcoming folks at the door. Just some great examples there already in the chat from our presenters. So one thing I also think is super helpful to do, and it again, as somebody who did it in this very presentation, sometimes you have to pause and really collect yourself before you get going, because you also have to remember that you're not a robot. Sometimes I have to remind myself of that. You do need to attend to the folks that have come to the presentation and what they want to get out of it. So it's good to take a moment and stop and say, I'm going to be talking about I'm going to pick on some of the examples we mentioned, burnout or Title IX or Gen Z. And I want to give you all an opportunity to talk about what you want to get out of this presentation. It's really nice. It gives your audience a chance to kind of weigh in, and then you have an idea of kind of what they were expecting out of the presentation. But also it gives you an idea of, potentially where you might need to go next for a future presentation if somebody mentions something. It just is a really great way to get a gauge on kind of what people were expecting. So expectation framing or expectation setting as framing is a really great way about going and doing that. Affects how learners perceive and interprets information, and you can remind people of your learning outcomes, which we mentioned earlier. You can talk about the approach you're taking and what you'll focus on, and talk through those things as well. What you want to make sure you do, and I had mentioned this earlier with the conclusion part, you want to make sure that you take a minute to kind of conclude your session and talk about your takeaways. A lot of times when your audience members are coming to a presentation, most people are only looking to get one little nugget or two out of that presentation. They're maybe not looking for an A to Z rundown on a particular topic. So if you can distill your presentation down into a couple of things, it really helps people know what to look for in terms of walking away. And sometimes it's all just about the experience of it, right? I remember presentations that I attended years ago, and I don't necessarily remember the details of the presentation, but I remember being there and how it made me feel. So it's another good, important technique to remember as you're presenting how you want to make people feel and what environment you want to create. All right. Again, all of that is based on your learners' attitudes and understandings and decisions. So again, Kelsey had mentioned earlier about being careful about how you start talking about things before the presentation. So you want to make sure that you're framing your discussion in a positive manner. It can be really easy to get off topic, and before you know it, you have the whole audience talking about something that has nothing to do with your presentation. So it's a careful fine line to walk, but you have to make sure that you're paying attention to the audience's needs, but also responding to, you do have a goal to get through your presentation as well. And then it's also important at the start of your presentation to tell your audience that you look forward to their questions at the end. I sometimes will welcome questions throughout my presentation. You can kind of handle that however it works best for you. For me, I don't mind if somebody interrupts me in the middle of a presentation and asks a question, because for me as an individual, I never do that because I'm confrontation averse. But for others, that may be the best time for them to ask you a question. Whereas others may just simply wait until the end when it's time to ask questions. That said, it's always good to encourage those types of questions, because that can be where the best type of information is shared amongst your audience. And lastly, Kelsey had touched on this as well, but when somebody asks a question, I remember I was working with a colleague last year that was terrified of the Q&A part of the presentation. And I was like, why? What's so scary about that? And I'm terrified somebody's going to ask me a question I don't know. Well, I'm going to be honest. There's a lot of things that I don't know, and that's okay. I have always just been very authentic and honest with folks when they ask me a question and I don't know the answer to it. You can certainly say, I don't know, I haven't thought about that, or I haven't encountered that. You can also turn it around on them and say, that would be a great topic for next year's conference, which is another awesome way to respond and encourage the learning and thought process as well. All right, so this was the part where we had mentioned that probably the most straightforward, or the part that everybody expects to be part of a presentation, just the substance of it. But how do you go about doing that in a way that is effective and people get something out of it? So for me, the best presentations that I felt like I've delivered have been ones that I have practiced many, many times. So for example, I'll pick on a presentation that I did a few years ago called Teach Me How to Gen Z. So for that particular presentation, I think I ended up delivering it to actual audiences like 3 times, but I probably presented that presentation like to the wall like 10 times. So I really encourage you to like take the time and actually sit down with your presentation. It also helps if you can get somebody who's willing to sit there and listen to you. It'll most likely have to be a loved one because I don't know about you all, but you have to find somebody that's willing to put up with you 7 times 50-minute presentation. That's a lot of investment, but it does help tremendously because for me as a speaker, I will oftentimes find myself saying, so we're going to move on to this point. So this, so like I just keep repeating the same thing. And when you have somebody who's kind of like a peer reviewer, except for your presentation, it really helps you kind of polish and sculpt your style. The other key thing that practicing helps with is it helps you realize how much about that information that you know, because if you can like not necessarily recite it, but if you can recall that information in a way to present to somebody without any note cards or anything, it really does help tremendously in terms of the delivery aspect. A couple of design aspects that you'll want to pay attention to. So you'll notice on this screen, the words are fairly good size. You want to keep in mind that for the font size of your design, you want to make those fairly large. So typically recommend like 30 or larger, because you're going to have folks who are sitting in the back of the room that it's going to be difficult for them to see your visual aid if you're using a PowerPoint or a Google slide. Okay. This is a good example of what not to do on a PowerPoint. So in this example, there is an awful lot of text on this slide, right? And you want to try to avoid packing your slides with text. Ideally, what you can do is try to put in the key points so that you have some kind of key demarcators to kind of remember, okay, I need to talk about drawing on my prior knowledge, or I need to talk about connecting to their context, different things like that. Your audience has a reason for being at that presentation, but that reason is probably different among every single member of the audience. So again, it's going to be hard to make sure that you have a presentation that covers everyone's needs. But as you build presentations and then you maybe eventually reuse them, keep that audience in mind because it may change the kind of the delivery and the trajectory of your presentation. So another example of this, for that Gen Z presentation that I had mentioned, I had presented it, I believe, once to deans and department chairs, and then another time to faculty, and then last time to like our Indiana AACRAO group. So I did not say the exact same things in every presentation because it wouldn't have meant the same thing to a faculty member as it would to, say, like a registrar, for example. Excuse me. So another important concept that you want to keep in mind is that adults, unlike children, need to validate that their information is based on their beliefs and experiences. So when you're talking through different things, you want to try to relate it to their experiences so that they can make those connections as you're going through your content and delivering it. So they're going to look for what's immediately useful and try to make connections from that based on what you're saying. So finding ways to encourage people to think through that and how it's relevant to their lives is going to be how you make your presentation connect with what they want to learn. So for example, you may want to say that I want you to walk away with X. So a presentation that I had delivered last year on, it was in relation to some processes in curriculum and scheduling. I had said I wanted folks to walk away with this idea that they have a better knowledge of systems thinking. So something that's an overarching concept that they can walk away with. Not everything is going to be relevant to everyone in your room, but you have to have a good idea of what your attendees determine is relevant to them in that context helps you ensure how much of that material they actually intake. Now I'll turn it back over to Kelsey.
All right, so I'm going to go into some neuroscience-esque cognitive learning things to talk about how humans learn and how they retain information a little bit. Human minds are story-making machines. We love to take discrete items and put them into a structure that enables us to learn. So, for example, just today I was reciting the 30 days have September, April, June. Or if you ever had a story or a rhyme for how to tie your shoes when you were a kid. Those are the sort of things that stick, and that's how folks remember. Stories evoke emotion, and that makes it more memorable. And we can relate to stories more. Relating information back to yourself or to the environment that you work in can help your audience process deeper and retain better. So use on-the-job cases, either yours or somebody else's, or make one up and frame it in terms of this happened to a friend of mine, and then just make up that friend. In terms of forgetting, use it or lose it is absolutely true. Neural pathways are made stronger when we hold on to that information, and it can be made stronger when we have something to do with that information. So when you ask people in your audience if you can think of a time when, say, being anxious or stressed motivated you to learn better, it gets them connected back to their life and their personal experiences, and those neural pathways are strengthened. So you also want to think about extending ideas for what are the next steps that folks can take to use that information in your presentation. What are some resources that they can follow up with to connect and strengthen those neural pathways after they walk out of your presentation room? And another great tool that you can use is your voice. Even if you're a terrible singer, your voice itself is an instrument that you can use to create certain effects. Tone can be used to generate presence and warmth. It's a fine line because sometimes warmth can cross into condescension, which is not what you're looking for. But when you do it correctly, it can signal some importance to your ideas and also reinforce that safe space to discuss ideas and stories, and again, strengthen those neural pathways through those shared experiences. I'm going to read you two statements. Too much stress impedes learning, but some short-term stress can have a positive impact on learning. And so that inflection can help emphasize the points that you're trying to make when you're speaking. Pausing after questions to prompt the audience to respond if you decide that you want to take questions in the middle of your presentation. That can take your audience from passive mode, where they're just sitting and listening to what you have to say, more into active mode, where they have to keep up and think while they're listening to you speak. Uptick your enthusiasm and emotional contagion. Folks tend to mirror the tone or the vibe that they're seeing around you. Like, you might notice if you ever take a picture and tell people to smile, you're most likely going to be smiling yourself. And people, especially if you have a presentation where you have lots of folks in the back, people in the back will appreciate those more exaggerated expressions. We don't have to go straight into performance mode, but if you find yourself veering from instruction to performance, pull back a little bit, but you want to be a little bit exaggerated in order to have the folks all the way in the back understand your meaning. Feel free to move around and have eye contact with your audience. You don't want to, again, glue yourself right to that podium. And also, again, don't dismiss remarks or gloss over them. Like Curtis had said, you can say, well, that's a great idea. Maybe that's a good idea for a presentation next year. But try not to dismiss folks who have ideas that you might not have the answer to. Make sure that you show gratitude for the audience interaction, even if you're not really able to do much with it at the time. And try to get some value out of what they're saying, even if you can't answer them or engage with that topic at the time. All right, now we're going to talk about a few tips related to avoiding that information overload and tips for your slide design. This is a kind of a funny clip, and we're going to play that for you now. Curtis, it doesn't seem like they're able to hear it. Right. So since we are not able to get the audio for that clip, we will send that to you with the PowerPoint and the recording afterwards, and you can laugh like we laughed before. Anyway, we can move on to how to deliver your content effectively by reducing cognitive load. So what is cognitive load to start with? That's a strain that you're putting on people's working memory. One of the hardest mindset shifts is covering from a learner to an audience mindset. So when you're giving presentations at AACRAO or other locations, less really is more. You want to avoid having a coverage mindset or feeling like you have to dump everything that has ever been said on this topic into your presentation. I'm guilty of this as a constant academic. Leaving out sources when you are doing a PowerPoint for your master's or your doctoral program usually results in lost points on assignments. So when you're in that mode, it's in your benefit to dump as much as you can onto your slides. Presenting is different. And this is not an assignment. Nobody's grading you on it. Nobody's going to call you out if you've forgotten a source or you found that it was not directly relevant to your topic. Nobody is grading you. So you want to shift to how much can your audience meaningfully integrate from what you're saying in 45, 75 minutes into the rest of their workplace. So you want to prioritize differentiating between your nice to knows from your must knows. Gar Reynolds has a concept called amplification through simplification. And verbal processing can be kind of overwhelming for folks if you're just listening. It's very easy to zone out, especially if you're in that passive mindset of watching a speaker and just listening to them talk. Trying to read slides at the same time is also difficult to do while you're trying to process and stay alert and active. Whereas visual and verbal are processed in separate channels and they kind of complement each other. So you want to remove extraneous text or photos. You want to help people focus on those key items of relevance to avoid overloading their working memory. You want to keep your slides relatively minimalistic. Use images to convey the meaning when you can.
All right, so we have some examples of slide content. Notice I did not say whether it was good or bad. So as you're looking at these, feel free to pop your immediate feelings about them into the chat and we can kind of talk through those. So the first example I have here is this one. So I know you couldn't hear the clip, but the clip that the individual was talking about was make sure you run spell cheek, all those different things. See some busy comments, busy. Yeah, exactly. So some other examples in here that are tossed in. There's lots of different colors, which can be a little alarming. There's this border around it. There's lots of examples of just this is very hard to read, right? So an example of how you might present this in a different way, more simplistic, and you're looking at something very clearly. You can see there's not all of those colors. Everything kind of shares the same color tone. Just another example of how you can improve that. Okay. So we're gonna do another bad example. You can probably guess. So here's your bad example. So feel free to pop in the chat what you think about this one. It's very bad color choice. Hard to see, hard to read. Yeah, colors are all over the place. Makes you sick. Exactly. So this one, I honestly, it's super hard to read but there are numbers on here if you couldn't see them. So a better way of kind of classifying this information would be to just kind of cut out that background and make it more, black and white almost in terms of how you're looking at the colors with a focus on, in this case, the USA in terms of their taxes on the average worker. Okay, so we had discussed this earlier, but talking about recapping your presentation. So as you're concluding, you want to make sure that you provide that additional exposure to the most important information in your presentation. So for the purposes of this presentation, I might say I wanted to make sure that today you walk away with the 4-part framework. We want you to learn how to activate, deliver, engage, and recap your information. So if there's one thing you remember today, remember that 4-part framework. That's a good way of recapping, and it allows your attendees to focus on the main points rather than some of the minutia. And especially when you have a presenter, I tend to do this a lot, where they are making connections or making examples about things. You may get really deep down one of those rabbit holes or a tangent, and it helps your audience get a better idea of what are the key takeaways. And it helps them consolidate their learning. So by doing this, it kind of helps with your memory and your learning, with the retrieval of that information, and it shows what's valuable as well. So what now? So the first 2 things that we're going to start doing is making meaning out of the intellectual and the socio-emotional pieces of your presentation. So the last one is what you'll do now. So prime your future content and extend that to sustain your audience's learning. So what do I mean by that? In terms of your presentation, as you're thinking about things, it can help you extend that content into another session. And I think one thing that we often forget as presenters is that it's okay to reuse content and revamp it. A perfect example of this between Kelsey and I is I think this is what, 2nd or 3rd Gen Z presentation we've been doing. So it just keeps kind of evolving. Neither one of us are Gen Z scholars per se, but it's just something that we're both interested in and like to talk about. So it can kind of really help you prime that. And also folks that have enjoyed your previous content may come back to your new presentations as well. So have another chat activity for you. So what's one strategy or idea that you heard today and you might want to use in the future? So if you have a second, take a minute to think about that, and then go ahead and put those in the chat for us to read through. Think, pair, share. Yeah. Classic, but a good one. Brainstorming how to activate, connecting with the audience. Bigger font size, great.
Yeah, no cluttered PowerPoints.
Yep. Always got to be a PowerPoint critic. That's what I used to tell my undergraduate students when I would teach like how to present, is you got to be critical of your PowerPoints.
And if you have any doubts, show your presentation or do a dry run to a group of middle schoolers. They will tell you exactly what they think about your presentation. No
That's
one's more
brave of
critical
you,
than
middle
12 to 13
schoolers.
year old.
All right.
All right. So some key points and some extension exercises to walk away with. To recap, here are some key points that you might want to consider or incorporate into your first presentation. You want to tap into your audience's motivation and curiosity. Starts by priming the audience with a question or a story to pique their interest from the beginning, from the moment they walk into that door. Try to make it relevant to keep your scope just on that topic at hand. And when engaging with your audience, try to keep it focused on the topic without meandering too much into anecdote or personal stories that aren't super relevant to the topic at hand. You don't want to overwhelm your audience, so keep it simple. It can be difficult to prune your sources on your slides, especially if you feel like you've put in a lot of work. But there's not need to put everything that has ever been said on the topic into your slides or into your presentation. Just what they think you feel like folks should most walk away with is what you should be focusing on. You want to display warmth and enthusiasm when you're giving your presentation. You've chosen to present on this topic arguably because you're passionate enough to go to an annual meeting and talk about it. So this is your time to convey your enthusiasm for the topic and show other people how excited you are about it. And finally, you want to give opportunities for folks to engage with your content and apply it to their lives. So after this presentation, you can take some time to go through an old presentation, or if you have first drafts of your presentation for AACRAO in April or March or April, go through it and identify 1 to 3 things that you could change based on what you learned today. And as you work on your presentations for Seattle, Feel free to brainstorm ways to recap, elicit, and extend that learning for your audience. All right. So I'm going to turn it right now over to Becky to go over some logistics for presenters.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelsey and Curtis. This was awesome. And you've said everything I was going to say about PowerPoint slides other than we do have a branded template for PowerPoint slides on the presenter guidelines page. You do not have to use it. Sometimes we get asked that question is, do I have to use the PowerPoint branded slides? No, you do not, but they are available there for you, and they've been checked on accessibility, the font sizes, those things are preset. So I encourage you to, if you do use your own slides, follow all the advice that you've been given about PowerPoint slides. So thank you, Connie. I try really hard not to read the chat while I talk, because I'll start doing this and then start wanting to show you pictures of my dog because my ADD brain will go off. So I'm going to try to stay focused here, but thank you all for being here. And thank you for accepting the invitation to present. And Dan had to go to another meeting, but also really grateful to the PACs and the PAC chairs and the program committee for everything they do, getting us all the way to this point. So what will be in your room in Seattle? What can I as a presenter expect? You can expect a room that has a lectern with a microphone on it, a PowerPoint, a projector, a screen, a clicker, and a laptop. Those things will be in your room when you arrive. Some of the rooms are set in what we call theater, which is just rows of chairs. Most of the rooms are set in theater, rows of chairs. Some of the rooms may be set in rounds because they're also being used for caucuses, or they're also being used for roundtable sessions that are placed throughout the meeting. We also have some rooms that might even be in a classroom set, right? Where there's some tables and things between chairs and rows. Those sets do not change from day to day. Those sets do not change from day to day. And it is really hard. In fact, it is not possible to move rooms. So if you go to check out your session on Monday morning, you kind of peek in and you see rounds or you see rows of chairs, just take a breath and adjust your mind to this is what my room is going to be, and it's going to be okay. It's going to work out. It's not possible for you to come to me and say, my session will not work in a room with rounds. If you have a session that will not work in a room with rounds, that is something to communicate now. And so we can maybe make like a few changes maybe on the room sets, but we already have assigned all of those out, where everyone's going to be, their time, their day, that's all happening. So you are not welcome to use your own laptop. No, you are not welcome to use your own laptop for your presentation, because the AV team brings all that stuff, and that's the equipment they're trained on, and that's the equipment they're insured on. And so we do not switch laptops out. So please do not walk into your session room and start unplugging things and plug in your laptop. We don't do that, but what we do is we check in at the speaker ready room at least 4 hours prior to your session. That is your chance to test the equipment, make sure that what you have, what you uploaded looks the way you thought it was going to on the laptop. That's your chance. If you have changes that you've made to your session material since you uploaded to the presenter portal, you can work with the guys. They're in there, they're very kind, and they will help make sure that your most recent version of your presentation is going to work on the equipment that's been provided in the room. The other very, very important equipment that will be in the room when you arrive are the microphones. So there will be a lectern microphone. There may be a handheld microphone for the presenter in your room. There will definitely be a handheld microphone for the questions from your audience. And we urge you, we require you to use a microphone. If there are words coming out of your mouth, they need to be said through a microphone for accessibility reasons. It's a courtesy to those around you. there could be 8 people in your room. And if you say you all can hear me, right? You are doing a disservice to the person that may have a hearing impairment or that may have something happening that they shouldn't have to say, hey, can you use the microphone? Because they won't, right? They'll just either leave the room or they'll check out. So we're really emphasizing, we have an accessibility task force and working on that. So please, just no one likes their voice. No one likes their voice, but just, again, we breathe in, we breathe out, we use the microphone. As you start taking questions, wait, be patient, let the microphone get passed to the person to take questions so that everyone can hear. So those are some things about equipment. So you are going to be asked to upload your slides to a Dropbox link by March 14th. I should have a link for you in the next day or two that I'll put on the website. And I ask you to please take a moment to read what we've entered for the naming conventions for those files. There are 190 presenters. There are 240, 50, even 60 sometimes presentation slides that come in. I cannot tell you how many presentation slides get uploaded with the title AACRAO. And then we have to try and figure, well, you know, like with who's the presenter and what's the session title. So go ahead, please, and follow our naming conventions for the name of your files. Yes, it's due by March 14th. No, that doesn't mean you can't make any changes, but the AV team needs to start putting letters in all the mailboxes that they have set up for your presentations. All of that AV and all that they have to park presentations on all those onto the server, and they need something to work with. So if 190 presenters walked into Seattle with a thumb drive 4 hours before and said, here's my session, it would overwhelm the system, and it would make it really, really difficult for you all to have a fantastic experience. So please upload your session materials on time. Please name it the right way. And then please, if you have any changes, bring those in when you arrive on site at least 4 hours before your session, and you can make those little tweaks. Make sure your technology works. Make sure that your embedded videos are working. Make sure that the animation that you had worked out on your Apple computer works on the Dell that's going to be on site. All these things that can be tested out. We are not recording or live streaming any breakout sessions this year. So this year, there's not a virtual option for attending the annual meeting, which is a change. We've done some live stream over the last couple of years, and the interest waned and the expense did the opposite of waning. And so we made the decision with our board to not live stream this year. We're not planning to record anything other than the plenary sessions. We might we might come into to sponsor, or we might come into something that enables us to record some breakout sessions. If we do, you'll be notified in advance that your session was selected. We're not going to invite anybody that didn't say that they were comfortable being recorded to be recorded while we're on site. So if your session is going to be recorded, you will hear from me, right? I'll tell you if your session is going to be recorded. We probably are not, and definitely no one's being live streamed, excuse me. So we also have Whova, which is our app. If you've been to an AACRAO meeting the last couple of years, you have been with us in the Whova world, and it is great for communication, and it's great for checking the schedule, and you will have a speaker. You'll be in Whova as a speaker, and I encourage you to log into Whova early, like a week or so even before the meeting. We're trying to publish the app about 2 weeks before the meeting, so people can start putting their schedules together and doing that. Encourage you, log in, check your session, make sure that your name is spelled right and your title looks good, and let you know all of that. You're welcome to add your bio and your headshot and all the good things. You also, as a speaker, have the opportunity to upload materials to your session. If you want to put your PowerPoint slides in as a PDF in advance of the session, you're welcome to do that. If you have a handout you want to share, you're welcome to do that. You can make little changes to your own session there in Whova. That's the beauty of it. If you find a mistake, if it turns out that so-and-so is not presenting with you any longer because their baby was born early or whatever happened, you can communicate those changes either to me. I'm Becky Fowkes. I'm on the website. You can communicate them to meetings acro.org. You can communicate them to Dan, the program chair, or your program committee coordinator who was in all those emails that you were sent, letting you know that you've been accepted. Just if you see something, say something, we can get it updated, we can get that changed. Oh my gosh, we realized we want to add this to our session description. We can do that. That's easy, it's instant, it doesn't take very long, not a big deal to change things about sessions. Also in Whova, your session will have, there'll be Q&A, and that dialogue can start even before the meeting starts. You might start to notice people are putting questions into your session. Are you going to talk about adult learners? Are you going to talk about the DEI programs being cut in my state? You can watch that your attendees might start to put those questions in, and you're able to answer them and start that. You also could put a question up yourself. What do you guys want to talk about? Or what are the points for the roundtable? So that's a cool thing about Whova is that the communication can start early. Whova. So one of you is going to find me when we're in Seattle, and you are going to have a lot of feeling happening in your body, and you're going to say, Becky, I need a bigger room. I saw my room and it only seats 80 people. And I saw on Whova that 200 have added it to their schedule. I need a bigger room. It's so exciting. And I'm just gonna give you a little half hug, and I'm gonna say I'm excited for you. The 200 people thought about attending your session. Probably about half are going to actually walk through the door. So just know that the Whova added to the schedule is not a real number. It means they were interested and thought about it, but about half, maybe even 40% are going to actually walk through the door. So that's fun to watch, but that's just a little reality check for people on those numbers that they see in Whova. I also, when you get into Whova, you're going to start to get little like graphics from Whova. They'll say, hey, share this on your social. Do it. You can. They'll give you little images that use your session title. AACRAO doesn't create those. So if you send me a screenshot of a Whova image that's like, why is it cutting off half of my face? Or can you make this word bigger? I cannot. That's a Whova thing. But AACRAO has a social media toolkit on the presenter guidelines page that I encourage you to check out. There's some graphics, there's some hashtags, there's some cool stuff there. Yeah, invite people to come to your session. It's an exciting way to promote all the good things that we're doing. If you want to change presenters, cool. Yes, we can do that. What we can't do is for you to say, hey, my best friend from Aleutian wants to join me on the stage. Please don't do that, right? We need to be respectful of our agreements with our corporates and not our corporates. I know we're almost on time. If you have not yet registered for the meeting, early bird deadline is on Friday. And if you are not registered by Friday, program committee starts to look at bringing in alternates, because it's not fair to the alternates that are ready and willing to register. So we'll be in communication about that if you're not registered yet. And I'm seeing in the chat, there's some questions about time and day. That's all posted on the searchable gallery. So if you go and find your session on the searchable gallery, you'll see your time and day. And that is all I have to say about logistics. And I appreciate y'all being here, and I want to be respectful of our time. So thank you. Thank you very much again for presenting. Feel free to ping me with any questions you have as we go, or between now and when we see each other in Seattle. So thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.